Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather Robison and today we're doing something a little bit different. I am going to be tier ranking books for the first time ever. For my first attempt at a tier ranking video, I decided to do all of the mystery or thriller books that I have read. Mystery thriller is definitely my top genre, so there's a few things that I did in order to narrow this down. First of all, I'm only doing this with books from since I started tracking on Goodreads, which was in about 2021. I've been reading primarily mystery and thriller books for most of my life. So going back to even when I was a little kid, some of my earliest books I remember reading are like Encyclopedia Brown and the ABC mysteries. So this could be really lengthy if I did all of them. So we're just going from like 2021 on. And then I also took out all of my Agatha Christie books because I have read a lot of her books. So I'm going to make a part 2 that is just about my Agatha Christie books. That way, A, we save some time, and B, I can get a little more in-depth and detailed with those ones because otherwise they probably all just go in the top. So that being said, we still have about 46 books, I believe, 40 something books to fit into this video. So I'm gonna go ahead and get right into it. Let me get my screen recording started and then we'll walk through what my tiers are. Okay, I'm just gonna put myself down in the bottom corner of this and we'll walk through my tier ranking. My top tier for mysteries and thrillers specifically is No Notes I Would Reread. I feel like this is specifically my top compliment for mysteries and thrillers because once you know the ending of a mystery, it's a lot harder to get yourself to reread it because you already know what's going to happen. So it really takes it having something special in order for me to be willing to reread a book in this genre. Either it's got to have really good characters or an awesome setting, or it needs to be complicated and crazy enough that I want to go back knowing the ending and see if I can put the pieces together as I read. My second tier is Good But Not Obsessed. These are books that are still really, really great. I don't necessarily have anything particularly against them. They're just not making that top tier category, and it might just be the time that I happen to read them. My middle tier is I Can See How People Like It. These are for books that aren't really my favorite and I didn't super love them, but I can see the elements there that would make somebody else really enjoy them. So I still might recommend this book to someone, but I personally didn't super enjoy it. My second from the bottom is I Couldn't Tell You Anything About It. These are books that just had no impact on me and I literally don't remember anything about them. And I feel like that just is a pretty good sign that a book just didn't hit right for you if you can't remember anything. And then my bottom tier are books that I actively have something that I dislike in it. So I have something against this book. This isn't just me just feeling indifferent about it. This is me really hating something specific about that book. There's not going to be a lot of them in this category. I can already tell you it really takes something specific in a book for me to really dislike it. So those are my tiers. I'm gonna jump into it. As you can see down the bottom, there is no specific order. I'm gonna try and grab series as we go in order, but we'll see how close I can get to that. But we're just gonna jump in. Book number 1 is A Curious Beginning. This is the first book in the Veronica Speedwell series. And I think I'm going to put this in I Can See How People Like It. This is one that I feel like was described to me as a mystery series, like a historical mystery series with a slow burn romance throughout the series. It gets very romance lusty very fast, and I felt like it really detracted from the mystery side. I'm just not a romance fan. That's just not a genre that I super enjoy, and so I felt like for me personally, I just felt like they kept sidetracking from the mystery plot, which I actually was pretty interested in. But if you are someone who enjoys romance, you'd probably really enjoy it. So I can see how people would like it if you are into more of the romance part, but if you're into it for the mystery, it's gonna be really frustrating. So yeah, I can see how people like it, but it's not the one for me. I have not continued the series. And then the next one, let's see if I can find book 1 in that. That is, so book 1 in the series, and I kind of have them spread out, is The Word Is Murder. This is by Anthony Horowitz. It is part of the Hawthorne and Horowitz series. And I would say that this was a good, but not so obsessed one. Basically, this book is kind of this meta thing where the author, Anthony Horowitz, is a character in the book and he gets recruited by this detective to come and chronicle his solving of different mysteries. I think the first book might be the one that I liked the best. Honestly, it's kind of fun. There's some good characters, but it was one of those things where you kind of feel like we're setting it up for a series, and so you're just following along the mystery, but there's a lot of questions still left to be answered at the end of the book. So it was one that had a lot of really good potential to go forward into a series, but I didn't feel like that book itself was top tier for me. Okay, and then book 2 was The Sentence is Death in that series. I would say also fit in the good but not obsessed. I felt like it was a good continuation. We had some fun little twists that we added to it. All of these I've listened to as audiobooks, most of them during a big long road trip that me and my husband were doing. Again, it was good. I thought this one had a fun plot. I don't remember a ton of specifics between this one and the first one because I feel like I listened to them pretty close together. But overall pretty good. Book number 3 is A Line to Kill. I'm gonna say that that one was also probably good but not obsessed. I feel like it still had some funny stuff. There were still some interesting things that we were doing with it. It had a good overall plot, so it's probably pretty similar. The next one was Twist of a Knife, and I feel like this is where it kind of has started to go downhill for me. I'm gonna say I can see how people like it. It was an interesting book, but I feel like we were starting to stagnate with our character development at this point. Like by the time you get to book 4 in a series, you feel like you should know these characters pretty good, but the series isn't finished yet, and there's supposed to be like 12 books in it or something. It's supposed to be some crazy long thing, and so I feel like we were just dragging out the character development, specifically about the detective character, where you just don't get to know anything about him, and then you don't get to know anything about him, and then you still don't get to know anything about him, and it's gotten to the point where it's just a little frustrating. I wish we were getting more information about that character specifically, and not just saving it up for... It feels like it's like some book down the line we're finally gonna get this big reveal about this character, but I feel like it's being drug out too long to the point where it's losing my interest. And then the most recent release in this series is Closed to Death, and this one was a bit weird. It took this weird twist where instead of being like a current murder that he's following around and being involved in solving, they're trying to solve this like past one that the detective used to work on, which was an interesting idea to try and switch things up, but I just don't feel like it was executed as well. I feel like I was a lot more bored with this one. And so honestly, I think I'm gonna put it in I have something against this book. Mostly because this one isn't one where I feel like I just couldn't tell you anything about it. I can still remember a lot of details about this book, but I just didn't love the decision to take us out of kind of the classic step. There were a few characters in here that just really, really bugged me. And that whole idea of just we're still not getting any information about these characters. Like this Hawthorne character is just so unknown to us, and it's book 5 in a series. Like I should know this character pretty well and feel invested and know tons of stuff about it, but this character just doesn't feel real at this point to me because we're just not getting any more information about him. And so I would say I have something against that book. I think I'm gonna give the series one more book, and if we're still not getting information, I think I'll be done with it at that point. All right, the next one is And Then You Die by Michael Dibdin. This is one that I found at a thrift store, and the cover that I have is different than this one, but I really liked it. And then I read it and it just did not live up to the cover for me. I think I'm gonna go with I couldn't tell you anything about it. I don't remember, like I remember the premise of what you can read on the back of the book, but I don't remember really any details about where we went from there. It was just kind of confusing and weird. I've heard a lot of people compare it to like Pink Panther, and I think that it was supposed to be a funny book, but it just was not funny in my opinion. Like it just wasn't my sense of humor or something. I just couldn't find the humor in it, and so it was just weird and confusing. And then we are jumping into the Robert Langdon series by Dan Brown. This is a 5-book series. The most popular one is The Da Vinci Code, but book number 1 is Angels and Demons. And this one I think is going to be my first one in No Notes Would Reread. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. It's this whole idea of you're following this professor on religious symbology, and you're getting this whole like basically the battle between like science and religion, and all of the books follow some certain religious organization battling out with some specific science competition concept. So in this one you're specifically following the Illuminati, and it is just really, really good. I feel like this one is super fast paced. It sucks you in. There are really high stakes, which you wouldn't really expect, and I actually really like the character of Robert Langdon. For being like a middle-aged man professor, he's very fun. So really enjoyed that one. The second one in that one is The Da Vinci Code, and I'm gonna go with good but not obsessed. I think, to be completely honest, I watched the movie first of this one before I read the book, and I think that that dampened my enjoyment of the book quite a bit because I did kind of know where it was going. So I don't know that that's one that's like on my reread list, because just watching the movie and then reading the book, I felt like my enjoyment went down, but it is still a really good book. I love the series overall. And then book 3, if I can find it on this list of books, is The Lost Symbol. This one, I think I'm gonna go with good but not obsessed as well. I feel like this one, they started to get a little bit repetitive. Something happens, they bring him in, he finds this girl, usually the scientist, who's then like helping him solve this thing. And this one's about surrounding the Masons, and it just didn't catch my attention quite as much as the other ones did, but it's still a good book. And I worked as a tour guide in DC for a while, so this was really fun because I do feel like I know DC well enough that I could picture some of the places that this was happening, so that added a lot to it for me, and I think it might have gone down if it hadn't been somewhere that I knew and recognized. And then the next one is Inferno, and this is one of those situations where I feel like the author realized how it was starting to get a bit repetitive, and so he totally switched it up. And you start with Robert Langdon waking up in a hospital with no memory, and all of a sudden somebody's trying to kill him, and it goes down this whole thing, and you're following this whole concept around the Inferno, and it's really fun. There's like this shady government organization military thing, and so this one I think jumped back up into no notes would reread for me. I think that I really appreciate an author being willing to switch it up. So that made it a lot more fun. And then the last book is Origin, and this one I would say also goes up in no notes would reread. I think that this was a very fun way to end it. You start to get some more modern tech stuff going on instead of just like general science. It really delves into like AI and stuff like that, and I thought it was just a very fitting ending, although it does feel like it's just another book. So I definitely think that the author could extend this series and write more books. It's not so closed off at the end, but I did think it was a fitting one to feel like, oh, okay, we kind of got up to like modern day issues of AI and stuff. And so it felt like a fun end for right now. Okay, the next one, I don't know if this is so much a mystery or thriller, but I feel like that's the best category that it could fit under, other than just generally calling it a classic. And this is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Other Stories. It's a whole short story collection. I'm going to rank this just based off of the main one because that's the most popular one. And I think I'm gonna go with I can see how people like it. This is one of those books that I think would have been much more groundbreaking if you read it at the time that it originally came out. This is just such a big pop culture reference at this point that it's very anticlimactic because you're going into it already knowing. Even if you don't know all the details of the story, you know the general premise for the most part. Like most people know that at this point because it's such a pop culture reference that it just isn't quite as interesting to read it. If you somehow manage to read this book before you know what the big like plot twist is, then it might be more interesting. But knowing the ending ahead of time definitely ruined that one, where it's such a short book. There's just not enough other interesting things that happen in it. Okay, and then the next one is Faceless Killers. This one is part of a series. I read this for a Nordic Noir video. I think I'm gonna go with I have something against this book. I could tell you quite a bit of detail about this book, but I don't know. It's somewhere in between I have something against this book and I can see how people like it, but I can tell you a decent amount of it, so I think I'm gonna go with I have something against this book. And the thing that I mostly have against this book is I feel like it is so out of left field where the solution is. Like they're chasing all of these leads this whole book, and then all of a sudden you have this huge time gap, and then they get some lucky break, and then it's some completely out of left field, they weren't even theorizing. it's not like that cool of an ending because it's just like, oh, some random guy that wasn't even on our suspect list. It's kind of how it feels. And maybe it was on the suspect list for a minute, but it just feels super random, and it's very much so like they were trying to stick true to how actual detective work goes, how actual police work goes, but it made for a very anticlimactic, kind of boring read. Okay, and then we get into A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This is one of the most recent ones that I've read, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm gonna go ahead and just throw it up in no notes would reread. I love the characters. I think they're super fun. I thought it was a good plot. It was an interesting one enough where I think I could get behind trying to piece it together from knowing the ending, and I read it really, really fast. And Good Girl, Bad Blood, that's book number 2. I think I'm going to, I think I'm gonna go ahead and stick this one up there as well. I did read this one in just a couple days. It was pretty quick. I don't know if I loved it quite as much as the first one, but it was pretty close. So I liked where they took the characters. It was very interesting to see the fallout of the first book. You're kind of following a lot of the after the fact, like the trial and stuff. So I did think that that was a very interesting route to go with it, and I'll definitely be picking up the third one very soon. Okay, this next one is probably a little bit out of left field. This one's technically more so a Western, but it's like a mystery too. And this is The Haunted Mesa by Louis L'Amour. I've read this one a couple times actually, which you would think would automatically put it up into no notes would reread, but I will say on the second time around it was a lot more boring. So knowing where it's going makes this book feel really long. So I would say good but not obsessed. It was enough that I did reread it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that anybody else reread this book, if that makes sense. It is really fun on the first time. It's very kind of paranormal, exactly what it sounds like, Haunted Mesa. Your main character is a ghost hunter with like a TV show, so it's much more modern than a lot of Louis L'Amour books are. So if you're hesitant on Westerns, I don't know if I would say this is exactly where you should start, but it could be an interesting one if you kind of wanted a mix of the two genres. Okay, the next one is another series, and this is the Inheritance Games. I'm going to jump to the first book. I'm going to go ahead and say no notes would reread for the first book. I thought the first book was really good. I got through these books really fast and I immediately jumped into the next one. I like the puzzles, I like the characters, I think it was fun. I think the Hawthorne, is that the next one? Which one goes next? Yeah. The Hawthorne Legacy book 2, I think I'm gonna go with good but not obsessed. I do feel like it took a little bit of a lull. I don't love love triangles. I feel like you can do a love triangle well, and then you can do it in a bit of an annoying way, and I feel like this is not a super well done love triangle in my opinion. And then book 3, where did it go? The Final Gambit. I would say good but not obsessed as well. I think the first book was my favorite of the trilogy, which tends to happen. I do like how they wrapped it up. I don't have anything necessarily super against the books, I just feel like they weren't as good as the first book. I didn't love the resolution of the love triangle. Personally rooted for the other brother, but yeah, so I don't know. It was a little downhill, but not much. Still good, but I'm not like obsessed with the second books as much as I was obsessed with the first one. I Hunt Killers. This one, I'm gonna go with I have something against this book. I have not been sleeping good, so I'm feeling a little mean. This one could potentially go and I could see how people like it, but this book is, the whole concept behind this book is that you have the son of a serial killer who is now determined to prove that he's not going to follow in his dad's footsteps, so he wants to try and help solve crime. The problem with this book is I feel like I had a really good concept and then just really bad execution. It's could have been so interesting, but instead you're following like a teenage kid who the cops do not want involved. They're like, go away. So he's basically just going and breaking the law in order to try and prove that he is not going to be a murderer. But like you're doing all of these things like trespassing and getting involved in police investigations where they've explicitly told you to leave it alone, and then you're just getting everybody in trouble, and it's like this whole thing. He's so annoying. and I just didn't love it. I think that this concept could have been so good if it was someone who was a little bit older and he was like actually in a official duty helping the government, or like the police or the detectives or the FBI or something. But an annoying teenage boy is just not the main character that I want in something like this. And I get the whole concept between like, oh, he lived with a murderer, he knows them like deep in their psychology, but I think it'd be so much more interesting if it was an adult who was actually invited to help, not a teenage kid who kept getting involved where he wasn't supposed to. And then the next series, we're gonna see if I can get these in the right order. This is The Secret series by Pseudonymous Bosch, something like that. This is a middle grade mystery series where these kids basically find out that this magician has gone missing, and so then they set out on this quest, and it's got a super fun narrator. It's very funny. I'm gonna go with Good But Not Obsessed for the first one. Honestly, I think we could just stick the whole series in there. They're all just fun, silly, goofy books. This Book Is Not Good For You is entirely centered around chocolate, which is funny. But I wouldn't say that any of them are like crazy standouts in this series. I have reread these books multiple times. I did reread them as an adult, obviously, so I do really love them, and they could potentially go up in that top category, but I think they're not ones that I'm gonna go like raving to everyone about, because I think you definitely have to be in the right frame of mind to enjoy them. You gotta be in the mood for like just humorous kid book, not like mystery thriller, make your heart race, crazy plot. The next one is Murder Your Employer. This one's also a pretty recent read. I'm gonna go with I Can See How People Like It. I enjoyed the book. It was good, but it wasn't anything crazy special in my mind. I can see how there are some people that might be really obsessed with this book though, so that's kind of where it's sitting. It's a fun kind of school version, but there are definitely some characters I didn't enjoy as much. I did like the dry humor, but overall it was just an okay book for me. The Red House Mystery. I'm gonna go with No Notes Would Reread. This one's a really fun one. I bought it in London and then I read the entire book on the plane ride home. So it was good enough for me to literally just sit and binge it on an airplane. I picked to read that book over watching movies, so you know it's good. It's just a classic old-timey mystery. I'd say it's akin to something Agatha Christie wrote, and I definitely enjoyed it. I would recommend it. Ju Nesba the Bat. I'm gonna go with I Have Something Against this book. I felt like it was incredibly random, incredibly randomly dirty, had so many things in this book were happening that had nothing to do with the plot, and I was just kind of over it. I feel like it was just one of those things where we had to give the detective all these flaws just to make him like this grungy detective with flaws, but I don't feel like there was any point in having them there, so I just overall didn't enjoy it. And then the next two are also part of that Nordic Noir video. The Hummingbird, I'm gonna go with I Can See How People Like It. I think that this one was one of the better ones in it. There's definitely some things that I didn't love. One of the big plot points in it is basically she has immigrated to whatever country it's set in. I can't remember which one this one is at this point. And her partner that she gets put with is very racist, and that's like a huge plot point behind it, which I think it like raises some valid points, but I don't think it was done in a way that I was like, oh, that was super thought-provoking, and not just like, oh, that kind of made me uncomfortable. It also definitely, if you were a runner, the whole plot of this book is that people are getting murdered out on running trails, so I don't know, this one was one of the freakier ones that like actually felt thrillery, so I'll give it points for that, but it wasn't my favorite. And then we have The Legacy, and this one I'm gonna go with Good But Not Obsessed. I did really enjoy it. This was my favorite one. I definitely at some point think I might pick up the next books. I thought the characters were really fun. The plot twist at the end was really good. It got your heart racing. It had all the elements of a classic thriller. Definitely a lot of like weird swearing. There was some weird elements to it. One of the subplots in this book has some stuff to do with like, there's like some weird stuff about, I don't like incest-ish stuff. So that was kind of weird. That's definitely a thing where like it's heavily like frowned upon. The kids were removed and put into childcare, and that's like part of the plot. But it is a little bit weird to read. And then The Maidens. This one I'm gonna go with Good But Not Obsessed. This isn't my favorite Alec Michelaide's books. It's definitely the most dark academia of it. I feel like the character just wasn't my favorite, but it's a good thriller, dark academia, slashery type book. Less psychological than his other books, and I think I prefer the more psychological thriller than the more dark academia vibe. The Name of the Rose. This one is going to go into my I have something against this book. This book is so long and so boring. I just don't get it. The reading is really hard to read. There's just these parts where they get off on these long tangents about religious something or other, and I just zoned out and skim read until I could get to the like little smidgens of plot that you picked up as you go. It's kind of touted as this like monk Sherlock Holmes character, but he like is not that impressive. And I just like felt like it was super anticlimactic. I don't know. The whole thing was weird. Did not enjoy it. 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle is gonna go in no notes, would reread. I thoroughly enjoyed this one, listened to it as an audiobook. I thought the narrator was great. And overall, just super enjoyed it. You'll see I have another book by this author that I read. These I both read this year. Really enjoying this author. I just thought it was great. I thought it was a fun, twisty, cool characters. There are some characters that are a little less fun than others, but I think it does it in a way that's not so gross filling. The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This one, I'm gonna go with I can see how people like it. I thought it was good. I'm not super into it. I haven't gotten around to continuing the series, which I think says a lot about it, that I just haven't really felt the need to pick up the next one. I think it has potential to become a good series, but I'm not overly obsessed with where they're going. I feel like it's really similar to the Inheritance games. You've gotten a love triangle thing that's just kind of annoying. I can see how people could be really obsessed with it, but I think just with some of the other stuff that I've read and where this is a genre that I'm really into, it was a little subpar, but I think if this is a genre that you don't read a ton, this could really stand out for you. John Grisham, The Pelican Brief. I'm gonna go with this one also on I can see how people like it. My husband really likes it. I don't know if legal thrillers are gonna be my top subcategory. It was fine. I don't feel like there's anything super special. We did listen to it while driving back and forth to Idaho from Utah a lot of times, so maybe it was just the frame of mind and I could try another one. I wouldn't completely write this author off, but I wasn't super into it. House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher is going to go into no notes, would reread. I just barely read this one super recently and I'm obsessed with it. It has just the perfect dry humor, it edges into horror, and I just thought it was fantastic. Be forewarned, there's quite a bit of strong language in it, but I just thought it was great. T. Kingfisher has worked her way up into some of my favorite books, and I've only read 2 of her books, so I just really enjoyed that one. Secret History. I don't know if this one really counts as a mystery thriller, but I feel like a lot of people tout it as one, and I'm gonna go I have something against this book. I do not recommend. This is one of the only books I've ever rated 1 star. I hated it. Honestly, no stars. Did not like this book. It just is gross. There's not a good mystery thriller. Like, just read the prologue and you will have gotten the whole plot of the mystery part, and then the rest is just odd and gross and weird. College students not actually doing any college, which I have a big gripe with the dark academia genre for doing that. So just no, didn't like it. In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. I'm gonna go with I can see how people would like it. This is one where, again, I think if you are like coming from dark academia and mostly in it for that, less in it for the thriller part, then you might really enjoy it. But I personally it felt like the story, the mystery part was lacking. And again, just with the dark academia books, why do we not do any actual school? Like, where's the school part? I don't know. I can see how some people might like it more so than some of the other ones, but it personally wasn't for me. Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney is going to go into my I couldn't tell you anything about it. I honestly just immediately removed all of this from my brain. There was nothing special about this book, but I don't have anything specifically against it. I think it was good when I read it from what I can remember, but it's not anything special. The Watchers. I'm gonna go with no notes, would reread, with the caveat that there's a lot of strong language in this one because they are Irish, which is probably accurate, but it's a bit much for me. But this one also edges more onto the horror. I'm learning that maybe I need to start looking into horror more. I just need it to not have so many crazy gross things in it. But I listened to this on audiobook. I actually have already re-listened to about half of the book with my husband, so really good. I'm super looking forward to the sequel. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The West End Game. I'm gonna go with I couldn't tell you anything about it. This one's a tiny short mystery. Some stuff happens. It's kind of similar to the Inheritance Games, but like short story version, and it just was nothing special, but I don't have anything against it per se. The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton is also going to go up into No Notes Would Reread. I loved it. It's very Sherlock Holmes meets Robin Hood, and it's just fun. It's a fun vibe. You're on the water. Not a lot of mysteries could you get me to read that were that thick and still thoroughly enjoy every second of it, and this one did it. We Were Liars. I'm gonna go with Good But Not Obsessed. I know a lot of people are really off-put by the writing in this one. I thought it was very interesting. You really feel like you're in the head of this girl who has, basically she got a head injury in relation to the mystery, and so she's going back and trying to piece together what happened because a lot of her memories went away when she got her brain injury, and so you're in her head, and so you're filling a lot of these gaps, or things repeat, or there's like interesting stuff going on, and a lot of people are really put off by that, but I thought it was very fascinating and very accurate feeling. If We Were Villains, I can see how people would like it. I did love the Shakespeare element of it. I thought the mystery was actually pretty good. I liked the idea of it being this guy who has done the time for a murder that he was falsely accused of, and we're now going back and getting the truth, and you're kind of trying to see who he was protecting through it all and stuff. That part was fascinating to me. I, again, just don't like all of the we're just at college to party and do drugs and stuff, and like where's the school. There was a little bit of school in this one, but not enough to hold my attention. There's a lot of just gross party spice things going on that I just didn't enjoy. But I can see how if you're not quite so picky about the content in your books, how you could really enjoy it. The Fury. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in Good But Not Obsessed. I think it was really fun. There were lots of fun characters. I liked the narrator on this one. Honestly, actually, let's bump this one up to No Notes. I think that's probably my favorite Alex Michaelides one. And then The Silent Patient, who's also by this author, I'm gonna go with Good But Not Obsessed. I think that one, I just don't remember a lot about this book, to be honest. It was the first one that I read, and I remember it being good. I remember bits of the plot. It's a very interesting one. I don't know that it would be one that I'd want to go and reread. Maybe I will at some point, but mostly I think I could reread it because I've forgotten a lot about it. I don't think I want to reread it because I was just so obsessed with it. Anyways, this video has been very long, but that is my tier ranking of all the mysteries that I've read since like 2021, not including my Agatha Christie books. So let me know. Did we have any opinions the same? Did we have any opinions really different? I'd love to know your thoughts. Based off of my tier ranking, are there any books that you would recommend to me that are similar to some of them that are in my top tiers? I'd be very curious to know, and part 2 will be coming probably very soon with all of my Agatha Christie books. That one is honestly going to be so hard for me. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to go about doing that one, but I will figure that out at some point, and that will be another video. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you enjoy the tier ranking videos, if I should try and do them with some of my other genres, and I will see you in the next one very soon. Bye.